Hello everyone, welcome to the Newfoundland Symphony Orchestra's Rhythm and Recess video series. I'm Mark David, Music Director and Principal Conductor of the NSO. Each Wednesday morning at 11 for your recess break, you can join one of our principal players who will share with you knowledge about the instruments they play. This will be done by performance, storytelling, and art, just to name a few. You will also learn about the origins of our Newfoundland music and many other things too. You can access our free, easy-to-download student resource anytime by visiting our NSO homepage. Click on Education and Outreach and then click once more to access our Google Drive. Once inside, you will find videos about the orchestra families and the various instruments, as well as many PowerPoints and activities related to composers and their music. You will also find lots of musical arrangements designed just for you. Thanks for spending your recess with us today, and now let's get to know your NSO.
Hi everyone, my name is Rob Power and I'm the Principal Percussionist with the Newfoundland Symphony. Today I'm going to give you a tour of the wide world of percussion. And there are so many instruments to cover that this will in fact be a 2-video series. So this week will be part 1 and next week we'll do part 2. Today I'm going to show you all the different snare drums, cymbals, and the handheld accessory instruments that we play in the percussion section. Stay tuned to the end of the video. I'll give you a preview of all the instruments that we're going to play next week. So let's get started. When you think of percussion, you probably think about drums. And certainly there are a lot of drums in the percussion section. You probably know the big bass drum, the timpani, which are the big kettle drums in the back. But there are smaller drums we use as well, especially this one right in front of me, the snare drum. Even if you've never played in your school band or you've never played percussion at all, you know the snare drum because the snare drum is also the central part of a drum set. And the drum set you'll hear in almost every style of music. So if you put on your radio, you will hear the snare drum in pop music, rock music, jazz, country, blues. It's always there. We use it a lot in the orchestra as well. Sounds like this. I bet you know the sound. So what is that buzz sound that we're getting? It's called a snare drum because it has snares, which are just these little metal, coiled metal snares that go on the bottom. They could be plastic, they could be cable, they could be some other material. Depends on the sound we want on our snare drum. But that's what gives it a buzz. You can see how they're pressing against the drum on the bottom. Now, I can turn the snares off, which means I have a little lever that lowers them so they're not touching right now. It's still a drum sound, but the snares aren't on. And when I put them on, that's our snare. Sometimes in the orchestra, we're playing music that requires a certain sound, and we may pick a different drum for that piece of music. So let's say it's something that's a little more march-like or military sounding, or even a lot of movie music like Star Wars, for example. When we play that music, we might use something a little bigger, like this one here, called a field drum. And you'll hear how the sound of the field drum is a little bit deeper sounding. Compared to the regular snare. That's the field drum. Sometimes the music will say use the field drum. Sometimes the percussionist will decide the field drum feels appropriate for that music. Sometimes we have to go smaller. We have what's called a piccolo drum. Now a piccolo snare drum could just be like this drum in front of me but flatter, almost like a pancake. Or it could be a smaller one like this. I might use a piccolo drum when I have a certain piece of music that calls for a certain sound that's very small or almost like a toy drum. So for example, in the symphony every year we play the Nutcracker by Tchaikovsky. And there's a part in that where there's a toy drum being played on the stage. So we play toy drum using this piccolo drum down in the pit. So you can hear 3 different sounds in this range of drums. Sometimes we may choose a drum that's somewhere in between, but those are the kinds of sounds that we use. We can get different sounds from the drum, certainly by having the snares on, snares off, but sometimes we may use something besides a stick. Brushes. So brushes will give us a different sound. Usually a composer may ask for brushes because they want this type of a sound. And also there are a lot of styles of music where brushes create a certain feel, rhythm, repetitive groove, like bluegrass music or something like that. There's a beat called a train beat. You probably know why it's called a train beat when I play it. It's also very common to play brushes on the snare drum in jazz music, where we do swiping motions. So why don't you come in a little closer and I'll show you what I mean. When we're using the brushes in jazz, sometimes we may play a stirring or a sweeping motion with one hand while the other hand plays some rhythm like this. If it's a really slow song, maybe we just want a bit of a texture, sort of a slow sweeping sound, and the motion is almost like you're stirring soup. And if it's a really fast, upbeat song, the motions become really quick and a little bit short, something like this. In a percussion section, we use a lot of different cymbals, and many of them you'll recognize, like the crash cymbals. And these ones we also call hand cymbals because we hold them with our hands using straps. And usually we'll hold one cymbal kind of steady and then make small circles with the other cymbal, like this. A pretty common sound. You'll hear it in orchestra and band, marching bands. Then we have other cymbals that we use in a percussion section, which are also part of the drum set. For example, the crash cymbal, also called the suspended cymbal. And in the orchestra, we may often use mallets on that cymbal to make a cymbal roll. And a cymbal roll is a sound that you've heard a lot because it's in movies, television. It's a very common sound for percussion. Also common to the drum set is the ride cymbal. This one is bigger and thicker and really good for playing clear rhythms. And then we have the hi-hats. And the hi-hats are actually two cymbals put together, and they're on a stand that has a foot pedal on the bottom. So when I press down the pedal, the cymbals are touching each other, and then I can play them while they're together. Or I can lift the pedal and play them open. And of course you can play them somewhere in between or alternating between closed and open. And because they have a foot pedal, of course you can play them just with the foot, not even using your hands. Hi-hats, ride cymbal, crash cymbal, they're all part of the drum set. We use them in a percussion section as well, but then we also have other cymbals that are a little more of a sound effect or have a very specific type of sound. Right here, for example, is a splash cymbal, which is a very small, thin cymbal, and you'll hear how different it sounds from the regular crash. Again, the regular crash is a little bigger sounding. Or at least lower sounding. That's the splash cymbal. Another common cymbal that we use is the Chinese cymbal. You'll see them over here, and they have a distinctive little curve at the end, and they give you this type of a sound. Another common cymbal, especially in jazz music, is the sizzle cymbal. And this cymbal here has little rivets, metal rivets in it. You can see them if I poke them out. So when you play the cymbal, those rivets all vibrate and you get this sizzle sound. And that's why it's called the sizzle cymbal. You can also get that sound if you put some kind of a chain or a paper clip, something that will buzz over a regular cymbal. You can still get that sizzle sound. Sometimes we have to use a regular cymbal but get different sound effects from it. A really common one would be a scraping sound. Scrape with a coin. Or we may just be asked to play the cymbal on a very specific part that's different than normal, like the middle, regular spot, or right on the edge sideways. They're all very distinct sounds that composers might ask for in their music. And sometimes we'll be asked to use a bow. So this is a bass bow from a double bass. And when you bow a cymbal, you can get really spooky, eerie effects. There are many different types of cymbal, and more than we even have here. So it's really fun to experiment and find a sound that really works for the piece of music that you're playing. So we use a lot of small handheld instruments in the percussion section. So let's start with the tambourine. And I'm sure you know this sound from rock music and pop music. Sometimes we need a different sound depending on the music we're playing. So we might go to what's called an orchestral tambourine. This tambourine has a drum head on it, so we can get some different effects. It could be I just need to play quietly but really crisp in rhythm. Or even super quiet with just one finger. And there are times when the music is a little too fast for one hand. So we can rest the tambourine on our knee. And if you're standing up, you can put your leg up on a stool or a box or even a chair just to get the knee up. And then play with two hands. Sometimes the music is loud and fast and putting it on the knee isn't quite going to cut it. So we'll use one other technique, which is to turn it over, play with the fist in the middle of the tambourine, and bounce it off the knee as well. So we get this type of a sound. And like all percussion instruments, we may need to roll on the tambourine occasionally. And rolling is not too difficult on a tambourine. You just put your hand up sideways and spin it. But of course, there are times when we have to play really quietly, and doing a roll quietly while you're shaking the whole instrument isn't very easy to do. So we'll do what's called a friction roll, or a thumb roll. And that's where we take our thumb and rub it along the drum head so the jingles vibrate, but not too loud. It can help if you maybe wet the thumb a little bit so there's some friction. And occasionally we'll take what's called beeswax, rub it along the tambourine just to make it a little bit stickier, so that if we have music that has a lot of thumb rolls in it, it's a little bit easier to get friction on the drum head. Now going from the tambourine to another instrument you probably know really well, the triangle. This triangle has a little clip on it so we can put it on a music stand, but it also means that we can hold it. So it's nice that when we do play it, if we can, we actually hold it up so that the sound gets across to the audience. There are a lot of different sounds on the triangle, but certainly two of the basic sounds would be to play on the outside like this, or on the bottom on a bit of an angle, and you get more of a shimmery sound. So again, you can really hear the difference. So we may choose one of those sounds depending on the music we're playing, or something in between. And like the tambourine, we may have to roll on the triangle, which we can do with one hand with the same metal beater. And you pick a corner, usually the top corner, and then you just go back and forth. From the triangle, we'll go to the castanets. And this instrument is Spanish in origin, and these ones are mounted on little handles, so it makes them easier to play. Generally, we'll probably play them on our knee or maybe on a pad, something like that. And we get this type of a sound. And of course, there are times when you're playing in a percussion section where you have to play an instrument, but you just don't have time to pick it up because you're playing other things. So sometimes we'll use this nifty little device here called a castanet machine, which is basically just a block of wood with some castanets mounted on it so we don't have to pick them up. Comes in handy sometimes. Let's see, woodblock. You probably know why it's called a woodblock. This one has a slot in there that's been cut to make it more resonant, so it has a bit of a musical sound. And then as woodblocks get lower in sound, we may go to what's called the tempo blocks. Let's see, sticking with the wood sounds, we have the whip. Basically, it's two pieces of wood with a little hinge on the bottom, and you're simply clapping them together to make a whip sound. There's also a one-handed version called the slapstick. It's two pieces of wood, but one is attached with a spring, so you can pick it up and play it with one hand. Another common instrument, the ratchet. It can be a sound effect, but also it can be a rhythmic instrument that we use a lot in orchestra music. Well, nothing leaves you hanging like a ratchet. So thanks for tuning in this week, and be sure to check out the video next week. I'll take you through the world of Latin percussion, world music, keyboard percussion, hand drums, and my personal favorite, sound effects. We'll answer burning questions like, what is this thing and how do you play it? Thanks for tuning in to the NSO's Rhythm and Recess series, and I hope you have an excellent day.